Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, I'm delighted to welcome John Hogue back to the show. In 1987, John wrote the book, Nostradamus and the Millennium. It sold 700,000 copies and was translated into 9 languages. 12 books and 20 years later, his understanding of Nostradamus' coded text has earned him the distinction of being hailed the preeminent authority on Nostradamus and collective prophetic traditions. That's a mouthful. Hogue's documented predictive track record into the new millennium has achieved an accuracy surpassing 80%. He's a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM, Whitley Strieber's Unknown Country, a host of other shows, and, of course, a very welcome visitor back on a Fireside Chat. So let's welcome John to the show tonight and find out what he says is coming in this tumultuous year. Hi, John. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be back on the show, Lance.
Yeah, it seems like we were just talking yesterday, doesn't it?
Well, it is always now.
Yeah, well, of course. Of course. That's funny, isn't it?
Well, eternity is always right here, right now.
Yeah, good point. We could start in a variety of ways. It seems like a lot has happened since your last visit. Maybe we should start with where you see 2008 coming from and headed towards so far.
Well, you know, it's been such an amazing year already. We've only passed through a little more than 2 months of it, and it already feels like early January was a year ago.
Yeah.
With the amount of the condensed amount of history that's taking place. I mean, that's why I felt compelled for the first time to write an entire ebook, an entire digital book that's sellable, downloadable from HogueProphecy.com that is just about this year and its predictions.
Wonderful.
That's the book's predictions for 2008. And one of the things we can begin with that comes to mind out of an infinite number of things is to first start by not doing what everybody else is doing, and it's talking about the political situation.
Yeah, right.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to my mind is that I think last week, this year, talk about a year that's already been lived in a few months. When it comes to weather and the tornado alley from the Gulf all the way up through the midsection of the United States, we have had over 211 tornadoes already.
Wow, I did not know.
And you know, the actual tornado season doesn't really officially begin until April, but we've been in it since January. And so we're on schedule with this rate of tornadoes, even before the peak season. We're on schedule to record the highest number of tornadoes in the United States since they've ever been recorded. And I think that is why when I started this book, I begin with the first chapter, which is solely about the Earth being in the balance of its climate change. It's the one fundamental thing that's going to affect all of our lives from 2008 on. I mean, 2008 is a milestone year. People are going to look back and say, it was 2008 when things really started to happen, where changes began, some good, some not so good. Changes politically as well as economically, certainly. We're seeing a certain illusion of economics, the bubble bursting, the house industry collapsing. That is what happens in these milestone years when things shift is the old is destroyed or fades away so that the new can happen. So it's a death and rebirth year for many things. And it's also a year that is significant as far as the rhythms of time go, because of, at least in prophetic time watching, we are currently in what is called a cosmic year. And what that means is the time it takes for the vernal equinox, which is only a few weeks away, the time it takes the sun's position in relation in the star field as we see it on Earth, as it moves around the sky for 52 weeks and comes back to its position in the spring for the new equinox, it's always slightly west from its last position. And, I mean, that's why the Julian calendar at a certain point in the 1580s had to be, by Pope Gregory, turned into the Gregorian, where they had to fix the loss of 10 days, or take 10 days off, and advance the calendar. That is the effect of our position in relation to the cosmos and to the sun's passage through the 12 signs of the zodiac, the equatorial line. And it takes the vernal equinox a total of over 26,000 years, just about, to do the entire circuit around all 12 signs. When it does this, each sign is an age, a month in the cosmic year that lasts about 2,000 years. Now, the rhythm of these changes, that's why I've often promoted that people are waiting for 2012 for some major things to happen. They're missing the fact that it's already begun.
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, this is the beginning or the end of a 26,000-year cycle?
Well, this is actually the midpoint. With this year, we enter the midpoint between two cosmic months. That means there's an overlap between each month. You see, it's not like you go to sleep in the Aquarian age and wake up in the next age, or Piscean age into the Aquarius. How it works is that you start feeling the influence and cosmic sense of the new age. Actually, during the last, you can really look at it as the three cycles of Pluto, which in predictive astrology, right now, Pluto's moving into Capricorn. The last time Pluto was in Capricorn was when we started feeling the influence of the coming Aquarian age, which was almost 250 years ago.
Wow.
And it was also the time of revolution and reconstruction and re-architecturing our society. It was the time of the age of reason and enlightenment in Europe. It was the time of the founding fathers declaring independence against King George and starting the American Revolution. It was the time when constructive efforts beyond dreams are made to make revolutionary changes. It's also the time of the executive. It's the time when we get down to business with our dreams. And that happened about 248 years ago. We are just entering it in this year. We will be in this transit for 18 years. And then 248 years from now will be the next transit of Pluto through Capricorn, and that's when we will be 100% into the Aquarian age, and all influences of the Piscean age will be beyond us. So at this date, at this time, in this year, we are exactly at the midpoint of this overlap. We're at the cusp of time between two cosmic months in the cosmic year. Now, deeper than this is, or more intimate to this, is that history has a beat, a rhythm. And what my book, Predictions for 2008, tries to show is that there's a, you can almost say that if there's a great time clock called the cosmic calendar, the tick of the tick-tock of the clock, the tick in this calendar is equivalent to 36 normal years. The talk in the tick-tock is another 36 years. The last tick, if you will, in the clock was around the normal years 1972-73. We are now going through the talk in 2008, which will not see another tick in the clock until 2044.
Oh, my.
Now, the tick represents a subtle leaning in the 36-year period of history towards assertive, mental, male, yang-oriented history. The talk represents a subtle shift towards the more emotive, emotional, introspective, intuitive, feminine sheen to history and its decisions. So it is not surprising that in the realm of world politics, that the last great persuader of a nation who had the power through pure oratory to persuade a nation happened to reach to the apogee of power and influence in the world in the first year of the last cosmic night, which was 1936. Today, we see a new potential leader who also has great power of oratory that is influencing the emotional collective body of the United States at the beginning of a new emotive period, a new cosmic night. One is the daylight part of the tick-tock, which is yang, male. If you divide a 24-hour normal period in the cosmic day, it's 72 years long divided by 236-year units.
Okay.
One's day, male, yang, assertive. One's night, intuitive, emotive, feminine.
Okay.
So we are basically now seeing the potential of another very powerful potential leader in the world who also has the ability to seduce or charm a nation and compel a nation through the power of emotive oratory to follow his idea of change. Now, I must specify here that I'm not, as some people might jump to conclusions, I am not comparing Barack Obama to Adolf Hitler as the same type of person. What I'm saying is that both men, although poles apart in their ethics, in their humanity, or inhumanity in the case of Hitler,
right,
both possess the same gift of oratory. And where a leader takes the people with that oratory could be something really beautiful, or it can be something like Nazi Germany. So it's not so that for the record, so that people are listening to this, I'm not comparing Barack Obama to Adolf Hitler, only in that they both have the same powerful skill of persuading audiences.
The gift of gab.
Yeah, the gift of, beyond that, I mean, Kennedy had the gift of gab.
Yeah. You're right.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a great speaker, an orator, but this is another level. This is demagoguery. And the demagoguery in the old, demagogue is in Greek, means someone who, through the power and persuasiveness of their speech, can influence the direction and course of a mass of people's emotions. They can do this by appealing to their deep collective shared feelings, or they can do it by appealing to their collective fears. Hitler was really a past master at the fears. Obama leans more towards the hope and the positive side of that. So that's why they're just different as night and day, polar opposites. But, I must express, to the point of the controversy of expressing it, that there is this similarity. And this similarity follows the rhythm of the cosmic day-night cycles.
Well, then, I guess Hillary Clinton would be another example of the embodiment or the metaphor of the divine feminine or the intuitive side as well. Would you say that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in fact, this is what's intriguing too. If you look at the astrology of both of them, since this is an astrological calendar we're talking about, the most ancient of them, the cosmic year concept was created in ancient Mesopotamia, in Sumer, in Sumeria, in Ur, and some of the oldest civilizations known in the Western world, in the Golden Crescent of the Middle East. And that was when the zodiac's constellations were first defined, and the great ziggurats were also used as observatories of stars. And it was out of watching the stars that they created this huge cosmic year cycle. And so, interestingly enough, here we are at this important split between two ages, with the world's attention on the very same place where the cosmic year was created, in Iraq, which is the modern Mesopotamia. And we have here a decision that will be made by whoever becomes president, which will be one of these two people, that will either set us on a course away from fossil fuels and away from the destabilizing influence of the Middle East, or actually get us more deeply entrenched in the problem for another 10 years. And the thing is, we're looking at their astrology, the two of them. Hillary Clinton is predominated in her sign of Scorpio by male yang planets. So her inner man is crystallized in the woman's body. Barack Obama is dominated by feminine signs. So he's a man with an inner woman. That's why he appeals to the intuitive and the emotional in his audiences, whereas Hillary Clinton is not that great a public speaker, but she's constantly talking content. Very male. The other interesting thing about these two is that they both parallel an echo to an earlier time. Every 1 to 2 generations, a nation has to face its lessons again as a collective lesson. The 60s have returned in our times as an echo, a reverse image of the same lessons, only in reverse image. And we have the white Kennedy has now been replaced in our times with a black Kennedy. And this is Barack Obama. He's certainly even taken on the mantle by the Kennedy family. Of the torch has been passed of Jack Kennedy to Barack Obama. Now, Hillary Clinton is a reverse image of Richard Nixon, seasoned, trained in a previous presidency of 8 years, ready to rule, ready to run the country at the first day. But he ends up running up against a charismatic leader who can inspire people's views and visions beyond seasoning, but more to where do we take this country in a new frontier. And also had a better sense of media, better speaker, better in all these ways. So, here we have this interesting battle between the two where it may actually replay the Kennedy-Nixon karma of the past 40 years. Now, what that may mean is that Barack Obama becomes president in 2008, but unfortunately is facing the challenge of the same tragedies that cut short Jack Kennedy and Robert Kennedy's run. There's a bit of Robert Kennedy in Barack Obama as well. And this is hopefully not going to happen, but if this is the timeline that's born out of this present, then you see Hillary Clinton's ascendancy to the office delayed 4 to 8 years. I think more like 4 in this turn around. And then she becomes, as I've been predicting since 1998, the Nixonian Democrat of the karmic echo, where she has similar traits of paranoia like Nixon, only now it's a right-wing conspiracy against her and her husband rather than a left-wing conspiracy, which is what made Nixon create the plumbers, which ended up with Watergate. So she has the potential of destroying what could be a potentially great presidency by listening to the angels of her darker nature. At the same time, the difficulty with Barack Obama, since I've got to be fair with both their potential challenges, is that I have sensed with him that as far back as August 2006, I saw him as the new Kennedy and that he would someday be called the Black Kennedy, and that has been vindicated. But I also saw him in a riddle that I couldn't figure out, similar to the riddle that was given to me in my own prophetic work when I looked at Al Gore in 2000, where basically I was declaring I'm absolutely sure he's going to win by 500,000 votes, and I'm equally absolutely sure he's going to lose, and I can't figure it out why that's the message. It's a riddle. Well, he did win by 500,000 votes. And he actually did win in Florida, but it was denied him. And I'm not talking about skullduggery of Republicans. I'm talking about something rather asinine, excuse the totem, that the Democrat party did in Palm Beach, Florida, where they created the butterfly ballot, which has been tested and documented to have stolen from Al Gore 6,000 votes to Pat Buchanan, who was definitely not, because the punchers were done so poorly that people punched the wrong votes. And they've confirmed that it was over 6,000 votes that would have gone to Al Gore went to either the socialist leader or Pat Buchanan because of the staggered nature of the butterfly ballot. So I mean, I'd like to say for posterity's sake, it wasn't Ralph Nader who took the election away. It wasn't Republicans who stole the election. It was the Democrat Party that botched their own future with Al Gore by creating a ballot, because it was a Democrat who created it, that people couldn't read properly, and denied him the 6,000. Remember, Bush won by 300 votes. It would have been 5,700 vote difference if Al Gore had had a proper ballot.
Well, that's not to discount the fact that there is skullduggery that does go on with the voting process.
Oh, certainly.
And significant
but that's not what took him down.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's not. I mean, yes, well, there was a lot of skullduggery going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, some people could even say it was a coup d'état.
Right.
But the fact is that all of this would just be hypothetical if it wasn't for the fact that the Democrat Party, in its own sloppiness, created a situation that took the presidency away.
Well, that makes sense.
And it's a similar thing that I find. I live in Washington State, and I just am producing for Hogue Prophecy Bulletin a new free bulletin where I look at the rules, or party rules, and realize that you have a situation, and these are some of the things that this year is going to expose and change in our political system, because it's broken, or more, it's inept. Do you know that in my state, the caucus, you could vote in the caucus and the primaries, and what happened is about 12,000 people voted in the caucuses, but almost 700,000 people voted in the primaries. And Obama won my state by 9,000 or so votes, but and a 33% difference between caucuses. But Hillary Clinton in the primary was only a 9% difference, which means she would have gotten almost half the delegates, and there was over 700,000 voters, which means that. But then they decided that the votes in the primary didn't count. So suddenly what happened in my state is 12,000 people's votes mattered, and 650,000 people's votes didn't.
Oh, my.
Is that democracy? No.
No, hardly.
It's if it is, it's jackassocratic.
Yeah.
But it's one has to be careful of one's totems for symbolic meaning.
Yeah.
A donkey is perhaps not the best totem because sometimes we act like donkeys.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I'm trying to say, which sounds a little off on prophecy, but it is these things that 2008 are going to shine. History is going to shine a light on this. These things are being exposed because they've always been there. But now we enter with this year, a 36-year period, where the things that sustained our civilization that can no longer sustain us for the future are going to be exposed. They're going to start collapsing, and that means economics, political, religious. This is the time of the great breakdown of the old. And it's going to, with each year we enter this 36-year period, demand from our feminine night period the intuition and genius and insight, which is the feminine, to find a new way to behave and manage our civilization. One of the things that's going to happen between now and 2040 is the addiction to fossil fuels will be encountered. A very hard withdrawal will take place, and by 2040 we will be off fossil fuels.
Well, do you think we're capable of sustaining ourselves that long on fossil fuels? It seems to me like we're pretty much bumping up against the limitations of what's possible now. I mean, things are breaking.
The problem that we're really facing, Lance, is that one of the dreams that's going to be shattered that was alive and well last year, but it's going to be shattered by the end of this year, is the dream that we all hoped was so that we had a decade before the tipping point in the climate began falling.
Yeah.
Scientists are constantly looking at their data, and it takes years to calculate a lot of the data of what we pump into the entire atmosphere of the Earth. And what came out in a report in the end of November of last year is that the parts per million that many people were calculating was the tipping point critical mass, somewhere around 455 parts per million of CO2 gases in the Earth's atmosphere, was actually not passed 10 years from now, but passed back in 2005. So we're in it now.
Well, that makes sense.
And you can see how we had a number of things which were tipping points that as usual the press and the media don't seem to gain the perspective, probably because they're told not to by the people who handle them, the owners of these corporations.
Right.
But we had in 2005 we had Hurricane Katrina, the first superstorm of the global warming that we encountered. We also had in 2006 and 7 the carbon sink of the great storing capability of the tundra regions of the north. It was shown that the methane and CO2 that's been released because the permafrost is thawing is actually pumping unbelievable amounts of CO2 gas into the atmosphere. The following year, we saw a significant and globally acknowledged meltdown of the polar ice cap. That's 3 tipping points. We also had last year in December, the Gulf Stream current stopped for a month.
Now that's where it gets really dicey, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the great conveyor engine of the cold and hot currents. It's a huge conveyor belt that goes around all the seas, major oceans of the Earth, and it's key that it
moves.
It sinks down from warm to cold at the point between Newfoundland and Greenland. And now that Greenland is melting at a significant rate and pouring fresh water into that region of the Atlantic, it's desalinizing the Atlantic, which means it's disrupting the conveyor belt. And if it stops, it will make significant overnight, within a month from now or something. If these things aren't going to be gradual anymore, we're going to see more and more of it. And I am happy to see that people are starting to talk about this stuff. But as the predictions show to me, especially for this year, we're kind of in the similar situation that existed in 1938, 1939.
Major denial.
Well, and also people could see the storm clouds of trouble.
Right.
But people kind of put Band-Aids on it, Munich pacts. You had back then the Neville Chamberlains of today waving little pieces of paper saying "Peace for our times."
Yeah.
Let's placate the situation. Everybody knew the hammer was going to fall, but no one really wanted to prevent it or could. Well, 2008 is like 1938. It's the Munich Pact now is about. It's not about an invasion of Nazi powers. It's about an invasion of all kinds of climatological, drought, famine, overpopulation issues. It's basically the new enemy in this current time of trial is not a political ideology, it is the real ultimate enemy, the core enemy that has always been delaying us. And that enemy is human stupidity.
I agree with you on that one.
And the feeling, as I feel as an interpreter and a bit of a predictor myself, I feel compelled in these times to send the message that is defining who the real enemy is. The real Nazi in the storm helmet is not a political group, an army. It's not Al-Qaeda. It's not America bombing other people either. Mm. It's human stupidity. Mm. The war, there is a world war coming, but it does not need to be against each other. In fact, the real world war needs to be a soldiering of human beings to fight ignorance, poverty, overpopulation, climate degradation. New sources of energy will be our new weapons against this stupidity. But ultimately, our moribund, defunct, or just absolutely silly political systems have to be renovated.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Doesn't it? What about the aspect that the global elite play in maintaining all of this because it benefits them?
Well, I think one of the more revolutionary declarations of the book, something I didn't even expect I would be saying, but I had to bear witness to it, because it's not really the way I would look at things personally, but I had to confront a revelation that's starting with this year and will be with us for the next 36 years. Like it or not, the future is seeing a shift in political powers from the political to the corporate. I call it the CE oligarchy.
Yeah, that's scary.
It is scary, but that's one way of looking at it. But the other thing is that there are also people in the oligarchy like Sir Richard Branson,
right,
and others who are actually moving towards making the world better. The thing is, what I try to talk about in that chapter of Predictions for 2008 is that we, the people, have to adapt our people powers to the new times. Not only do we need to be more participatory in our democratic process, because if we don't, we're facing no later than 10, 15 years from now emergency rule in many parts of the world, which is another name for fascism.
Exactly.
And it may be necessary.
Yeah.
If we don't start behaving more responsibly now, if you're going to have the food, the water, and the commerce flowing, there may be martial law, there may be price restrictions, there may be all kinds of things that are quite dictatorial to sustain life. The motto of that later day may be, it's not about democracy, stupid, it's about life and death.
Yeah.
So let's not get to that point if we can, and so let us try to keep our democratic values, and one of the ways we can do that is that beyond being voters, I foresee that we need to become vote with our consumerism.
Oh yeah.
That we need to It's a relationship with the oligarchs, the CE oligarchs. If they're going to make money, we have to convince them that the supply and demand, the demand is going to be a demand for products that we really need, a demand for ecological responsibility, and we can ram home that idea by making profitable those people in the CEO world, in the new aristocracy that do that, the Richard Bransons of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the Enron. or Dick Cheney's folks. I can't think of their name.
Halliburton,
yeah. What you say to Halliburton is, you don't buy internal combustion cars. What you say to your government is, we're not going to vote you into office unless you manage and give perks to government, to industry, to create earth-friendly cars, and we will then buy those. We will not buy the internal combustion engine anymore unless it's a hybrid. And it's like something I saw in action in this area. There was Home Depot, it was discovered, was using hardwoods from old-growth rainforests in Indonesia for their furniture. They received, when that was made, when people were alerted to that, they received a 60,000 emails
Wow.
From 60,000 potential customers saying, we're not going to buy anything from your company anymore until you stop doing that.
Wow.
And they stopped.
Wow.
Like that. So that's people power. It's almost like a new form. In prophecy, one constantly looks at the eternal reoccurrence, as Nietzsche used to talk about, of the same things in new clothes, new orders, but essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
The rise of union thinking is not going to be us against the working man against the management. It's going to be the responsible, alert consumer, life-affirming consumer who wants the CEOs to make money, but make money making the products that profit the world and make not just the pockets richer, but the whole world in all its levels, ecological, spiritual, social, political, also richer.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I've heard some rumblings. I know people are concerned about finances, so one of the rumors that I've heard floating around is that there's some kind of potential for collapse in the markets this October. What do you see on the financial horizon?
Well, if we're not collapsed into a deep recession by October, we certainly will be by October. We are not going to a depression, though.
Well, no, you don't think so?
No. And the dollar is not going to collapse because of the way the system's set up. Even though there's a lot of people getting very excited and running around like Chicken Little, and certainly the dollar is as at the weakest it's been since the early 70s during the last cycle of stagflation, which, by the way, was when the last cosmic day began.
Oh.
And now we're 36 years later with a new version of it. And the thing is, what is ended, though? One thing I will predict on the record here is that for this year, the U.S. dollar will no longer be, nor will it ever return to its preeminent position as the number one global currency. What we're seeing now is a little bit like what happened when it was a bipolar world between the Soviets and Russia breaking up into a multipolar world. Now, more than one currency is going to be used. But unlike those who feel like it's going to tank and collapse overnight, it may very well be that we will not see an ending of the dollar like the pound sterling. Because remember, there used to be that the pound sterling was a currency, a global currency, the preeminent currency. It took almost 40 years for the pound sterling to kind of slowly dwindle back into relative insignificance. And I think what we're seeing, of course, is a much more rapid fall. I think certainly in 36 years you will see the U.S. currency just being one of others, or even in 36 years you might see a new currency altogether called perhaps the Terran.
Well, if you're around in 36 years, to see what happens.
Well, here's the thing. You and I may be around in 36 years, not in these forms.
Right.
But we may be born again. If half the world believes in reincarnation and half the world doesn't, that's a 50-50 chance. And another way of looking at it is, certainly you and I, when we're not in these forms anymore, will never return the same.
Right, exactly.
So in a way, it is a one life as Lance, one life as John. And then whatever we are next will be completely different, maybe completely different gender, completely different part of the world, skin color, a completely new set of conditionings and biases.
Yeah, exactly.
And around trying to kind of bury this living soul that we always bring back into the flesh. So, that's why I say to people, which I get this all the time, oh, well, I won't be there to see it. I said, 50-50 chance you will be there to see it and reap it. So,
exactly.
Why not just for your own selfish reasons, let alone just the compassion you might have for your children, grandchildren? Why don't we fix it now so that we leave the world ever better than we found it, because we'll probably come back and be in that ever better world, or worse world.
Exactly. And we've been throwing bones over our shoulders for about 4.5 billion years. And, at some point, the mess is so big now that it's time that it's like a reckoning.
It is a reckoning. It's a good word for it.
You brought up something interesting about the possibility of reincarnation, and I wanted to ask you about something personal that I heard about you, that you had a near-death experience.
Yes.
Do you feel like talking about that a little bit tonight? Because I'm fascinated with that. I've had several guests on about that subject, and it's...
Yeah, actually, the tale can be told by... I published it back in 1994 for Millennium Book of Prophecies, the opening foreword, because I looked at what happened to me as a microcosmic version of what's about to happen to the world, a near-death experience. And once you've had the shock of it and the revelation of it, you come back, if you're lucky, come back to this world changed.
Yeah.
And that we are, as a people, are going to face a collective near-death experience in the next 36 years.
Wow.
And hopefully we'll come back with it more enlightened and changed.
Oh, wow.
And so my story happened after I returned from India, where I met Osho for the first time. And I came back, and it was on Ash Wednesday in 1981. I was going down to visit my girlfriend at the time, who was living down in Laguna Beach. I was up in San Pedro, California. It was about an hour drive or so, an hour and a half. And so I was getting ready to go. She was going to fix me some dinner. And I suddenly, as I was getting ready to go, I suddenly felt this incredible feeling of a vast presence that was almost as if I were an ant, and some giant man was above me and was going to squash me. And it's so big I couldn't even see him do it. Something vast and huge and unapproachable by language or reason, but it was there, a presence. And I said to my mother at the time, as I was leaving the place, was like, I don't know. I feel like something is going to happen to me, and maybe I shouldn't drive. And then I was just hovering at the door, and then suddenly something pushed me out of the door. It was like an invisible hand just pushed my shoulder, and there I went. And so 20 minutes later, I was going through a green light in Long Beach, California, and a guy driving 55 miles an hour, illegal alien without a driver's license, borrowing his brother's car, driving 55 miles an hour in a huge station wagon.
Whoa.
Crashed right into the door of my green Maverick two-door compact.
Wow.
And the initial feeling was, as I saw this beige blur come from the left, I felt like for an instant, the steel and glass and leather of the car was being ripped away like shreds of cloth. And I felt myself exploded into a vast golden vastness. And when I was in the vastness, I felt, on the one hand, all kinds of things that are polar opposites in our normal life here converging and interacting, and yet not losing their differences, but completely united at the same time, unlike they are here or perceived here. I was basically not thereing in this not there place. But the not thereing was more real than when I thered down here. I have to change the English language to deal with something that goes beyond dialectics. What I felt was that I was not alone. I was not the only one not thereing. There were two other presences not thereing, which were impressing upon me without saying anything, that if I were to put it into language, they were saying, you have welcome back, you've come back to your home. You've always been here, in fact. You're even here now. But they basically impressed upon me that if I wanted to stay home, I could stay. But they said with no judgment one way or another. It was like a total such is the case, here's your options, and we love you no matter what you do. And the other thing was, or you will, you can go back because you had some things you decided to do down there. You can go back. It's interesting, down was the impression. More not like down as in a place below, but more like the difference between being in the violin section of an orchestra and looking at the bass tuba. It's not really a up down, but a level of vibratory degree from high to deep low.
Wow!
And so in that musical context, looking at the lower testatures, I saw Long Beach and the car and all that, and I saw a flash of what could be a potential life. I was 25 when it happened. What I was understanding from the experience is that I had another 70-year potential. That doesn't mean I will live it, but this life cycle and this body-mind has the potential to live another 70 years.
Wow.
Sometimes I think I'm not going to get there now, but what I saw, and I think it works somewhat in my work, in that experience I saw all the possibilities of my life in those 70 years, and that somewhat relates to the outer life around that life. And I think there are times when the memory of that sparks out of a spontaneous place deep inside me, which I like to call the oracle, to give me an idea of potentials. Now, the thing to understand about the future is it's not fixed in stone at all. It is as dynamic as the present. It's, in fact, an echo of the present. So if the present is constantly changing, then the future is constantly changing. And it's only because we are trying so hard to follow certain conditioning by our society that we work, not knowing, we're unconscious of this, but we work very hard at making things always the same. And that's why we appear to be predictable, and that's why a lot of timelines are apparently predictable, but it's not the natural state of things. It's a very unnatural state that we are sustaining with tremendous spiritual and psychic energy. And what I saw in that glimpse, I only have like a trace conscious memory of the things that happened. It was so much more than what I'm saying. And what I did when the two not there-nesses made me a not there-ness look down or listen to the lower testature of Long Beach, California.
Right.
I had the impression that I said without words back to them that I'm really going to kick myself for going back. Because what I also noticed is that that 70 years that I saw went by like a split second. It was when I remember, and this is an important point, that a lot of the traditions or studies of meditation are really techniques to help us remember the miraculous that is really with us at all times. And when I remember, I realize that I've never left that place. We've all been there.
Yeah.
We are there now.
Yeah.
And we not there with an infinite more presence of aliveness than we think we there here. And so and also it is eternal. It's like you can snap your fingers up there and live in our normal time frame 1,000,000 years, but it only goes by like a snap of the finger. And so that's the convergence of long time and no time.
Yeah.
And so I then went back into my body, and the first thing I noticed in real time, normal time, was that I was slumped over my driving wheel, and the first thing I saw was the mala with a picture of my guru on it. And I looked at it, and my first normal thought was, well, at least that's not broken. And then I looked around the car. I felt incredibly refreshed, like I had been away from ages, like I had been some star traveler. It was amazing. It was like I had come back to this world, and I felt very, very cool and refreshed. And I was dressed in the orange kurta of a swami at that time, because I had taken orders of an Eastern organization. And the car all around me was a wreck. The driver's shaft was bent. The dashboard had turned into an accordion. I giggled at the foot pedals because they had somehow managed to tie themselves into a bow tie.
Whoa.
And then I hear this tap, 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 tap to my left. I look over slowly, and I see an ashen-faced paramedic and behind him is another one with the jaws of life.
Oh my
and he's
God.
saying, "Can you get out?" And I kind of look around. I was not hurt. All I had was a slight cut on my wrist, very small, like a little nick, and I had a slight pain in the upper left part of my head, which I assumed immediately was a concussion from hitting the window at 55 miles an hour.
Right.
I was, by the way, wear your seatbelts, folks, because if I hadn't, I'd be dead. And the seatbelts really do save you. I always wore my seatbelt, and it kept me from being thrown 55 miles off the window and through the window on the other side. Now, I know about these details that I'm about to tell you because there was a man from Ohio that saw the whole thing, called it in. So I know I was out of my body for 20 minutes, and they had given me up for dead. I was ashen-faced and slumped. Of course, I'm very limber, especially in those days, and it looked like my neck had been broken by the hit. So stooped way over and pale, and they thought, oh, he's dead. He's got to be dead. And they were working on the illegal alien Mexican guy who had broken his arm and really had been more injured in this situation. He was totally freaked out, understandably. He's illegal and all that. Of course, now it's not such a big problem, but he actually tried to sue me for being in the way.
Oh my!
But of his 55-mile-an-hour zip through a red light. But anyway, he was being attended to, and then when they saw me stir, this man from Ohio said it was like they thought, oh my God, this guy's coming back from life, and these guys were going to then get me out. So I tried to find the door knob. Unfortunately, on my side, it still was in working. So I opened the door, managed to creak it open, step out, and here I am, and I think it was actually in my maroon kurta robes, my mala. I step out of this car into a sea of gas in the intersection, gasoline everywhere. And then here comes this big man with a huge belly that the suspenders are trying to hold into his pants. And he's running across. And just to show you how shocked the paramedics were, they didn't stop him. He picked me up in his arms and said, "Oh, son, you're lucky to be alive."
Wow.
And then he grabbed my mala and ran his fingers up and down the beads and said, "Them sure good beads." And I said, "Yes, they are." And then I turned to the paramedics and then I took command of the situation. It was so weird. It was so ethereal. I mean, so kind of strange, because here I am, it was so comic in a way. I'm the guy who's calling out the thing saying, look, I have a pain in my head. I can't remember amount of times. I think I have a concussion. Do you think we ought to take me to the hospital for observation? Yes, sure. And suddenly they get into the whole authoritarian stuff. And but they were standing there with their jaws open. I had the policeman over 2 days. When I was there for 8 hours observation, I felt absolutely like I'd been reborn. Like I'd had a new lease on life. I also felt that I've never been quite back into my body like I was before the accident. Kind of like it's very easy for me to have eyes in the back of my head, in fact, eyes over my head, if I want to.
Yeah.
And that it's actually something got opened up. I guess somebody had to beat me over the head to do it, but something got opened up, and I have never been the same. And I remember my teacher once, years later, I went to India, and I sat next to somebody who had a question asked that was kind of similar to what happened to me. And they said, ever since this experience, I've never been able to get back into my body, and it feels very weird, and I feel like this is really terrible. And my teacher said to this person, you are blessed. There's sometimes when people are shocked by physical accidents, their connection to their attachments to the body-mind are broken to some extent, and that makes it much easier to embrace a far larger world without them. So everything I've learned from this experience and many other experiences, even the darkest things that are facing us, even what's coming in the near future, is like that auto wreck. The whole human race is going to have the auto wreck I had.
Okay.
And to each of you who are in the car with me, a bit of words from experience. There's two ways you can experience this. You can miss by misjudging what's happening and the discomfort and the fear and stuff. You can take these things contract, or you can take these as ways to snap you out, give you a good blow over the head to wake you up.
Yeah.
And then if you take it in the positive, even these dire things, you may even die in the process. But it's really, from my experience coming back to it, it's really not a problem. Existence goes on. Your consciousness goes far beyond this. The thing, though, is that one of the reasons why I believe people are afraid of death is not just because in the process of death sometimes you experience all the opportunities missed. But
we're running out of time.
Okay, well, I'll end it on this, that what we're also afraid of is you have to feed your soul. You have to give it more awareness, more love, more compassion, and deepen it inside of you. And I can only say that meditation, the practice of the science of self-observation, is what's helped me do this.
Huh.
And that must be, that at least from my experience is what I offer to all of you, is, and if you go to HogueProphecy.com and talk to me at HogueProphecy.com, you can get my email. I can give you some pointers of what's worked for me.
Wonderful. John, you know, this hour's flown by on angel wings. We always start to get into the most interesting stuff right at the end of the show.
Yeah.
Thank you again for coming back, and we'll have to have you back on soon and find out more about, it's always fascinating talking to you.
Well, thank you, Lance. And, this is you're the first person that got this story out of me on radio after 800 of these. So
Bravo. Well, you always surprise me. Thanks a million, John.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, John. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.